experiences coming out of the contribution from Barvin, I recognize that the approach in terms of decriminalizing has to go farther than dealing with just the licensing regime and the fact that you want to take out the criminalization there, but it also has to stretch to other ways in which vendors are regulated. To this end, that got me to examining the markets and slaughterhouses regulations, and in particular how the public markets would then be run. So there are some provisions that are that have criminal offenses that perhaps need to be examined again so that they can perhaps carry an administrative penalty rather than a criminal penalty. So, for example, in Regulation 4 of the Markets and Slaughterhouses regulations, you have a provision which states that if any person in a public market refuses or neglects to comply with the direction of the chief supervisor in relation to the maintenance of order or regularity in the public market, that person shall be guilty of an offense and liable to a fine of not exceeding $25. So in that instance, perhaps you might want to intervene there to make it subject to an administrative penalty, and you would add it then to the administrative penalty regime that is in the bill. Another instance would be Regulation 6, which speaks to the days and opening hours of public markets. Again, the chief supervisor then deals with that, and that is also subject to a penalty, a criminal penalty. In relation to regulation.
Can I ask you to pause there?
Yes, please.
Is there a corresponding piece of legislation for the fisheries division management? Sorry? Oh, you're guided by them? Okay, fine. Proceed, sorry about that.
Yes, Chair. So in relation, remember too, fish markets are public markets too, right? So they would be under the same regime. The Regulation 7 deals with, the ringing of the bell each half an hour to deal with the carrying of live animals and commodities, and that is subject to a criminal offense. There's also the removal of marketable commodities within the stands and spaces of the market. That is also subject to a criminal penalty, and that is in Regulation 10. Regulation 18, which is the one that we read earlier, dealing with certain behaviors like cursing and urinating and depositing refuse and that kind of behavior, that is subject to a criminal offense. And then Regulation 34 speaks to not exposing or selling a commodity except where you're dealing with a stall rented or occupied and paid for with the rent, or accepting a market stall rented or occupied by him, and that is subject to a criminal penalty. So what I was proposing is that those particular regulations, then what you would do was, in the consequential amendments, you would go in and amend the markets and slaughterhouse regulations, those specific regulations, and have them be subject to administrative penalties. And then those same provisions would be added to the 7th schedule, not the 7th schedule, the 7th schedule, or the schedule dealing with admin penalties,
Yes,
so that
you're
all
right.
of it would be represented. But that's my proposal.
Fine. And thank you, Chief. Can I just ask a question with regard to Clause 9? For some reason, Clause 9 of those regulations, 9, is there 9A7?
Right. So Regulation 9A talks about the control of fishing boats.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
So that is a $1,000 criminal penalty and 6 months for a term of imprisonment. But I don't think that we would intervene to deal with that specifically. That has to be regulated differently from the provisions that I spoke to before.
Okay. Okay, so colleagues, let's make this simple. Let me just put it this way. What the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel is suggesting is that there are a number of areas which create criminal penalties within this body of regulations, and she's identified them and is suggesting that we lift them out for the purposes of them being treated as you go forward as areas which would attract administrative penalties instead of being criminally, or instead of attracting criminal sanction. Mr. Lewis, you are in the business of managing the markets. Does this seem to make sense to you, sir?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense, sir. On the whole, though, I believe that this Markets and Slaughterhouse Act and Regulations 1958, it needs a thorough going through and being made more applicable to the times that we live in right now.
I think that the Minister of Agriculture, who's here, may wish to speak to that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we have already agreed that there must be an amendment to the Markets and Slaughterhouses Act because of this very statute that we're currently discussing. So it would be nice to do a parallel so that the two can be finalized together, because what it basically speaks to is how we take out that which was in the Markets and Slaughterhouses Act to put into this vending bill, and then amend what is left to make it relevant for this 21st century requirement.
Fair enough. Thank you, Minister. Ms. Holder, do you have anything that you wish to add to that?
No, sir.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Ms. Nichols, I know you're not in the business of managing the markets, but you may have a perspective on it.
Yes, sir. I'm in agreement with it being decriminalized because, given that we have the manager, some of those things can be dealt at that managerial level, and hope to bring some cohesion among the officers of the markets and the fisher folks.
Okay. Not directly related to anything arising out of the legislation, but I just want to get a feel for how difficult some of this is in practice, because in this environment here, we are dealing with a largely artificial type of environment. The reality on the ground in the market is a slightly different thing. Do you foresee any challenges from what you've been hearing and seeing so far, Mr. Lewis?
Not in the true sense. I have a question here, though, in terms of seeking some clarity. Part 3, regulations of vending activities, clause 2. Is page 13 on my page?
Part 3, regulation of vending activities. What page are you on?
I'll be on page 13. I think that you might be a page ahead of me or behind me for some reason. But okay. It says the minister, on consultation with the minister responsible for public markets and minister for fisheries, grant a license to an applicant referred to in subsection 1 within 7 days of receipt of application. I was just trying to find out, though, in terms of seeking some clarity, if some person wants to vend in a fish market, the first person of contact is the minister in charge of commerce, as opposed to the minister or the senior manager of markets.
That is in fact accurate. Now, I will defer to the Chief Parliamentary Counsel to explain the thing to you, but loosely speaking, it is intended that Commerce will be the repository of all of the register of vendors in Barbados.
Right.
It is intended that there's a lovely term that the Chief Parliamentary Counsel uses that I'm very attracted to. What is the principle, ma'am? That principle which says that not just the minister but his staff. The Carltona principle, yes. That the Carltona principle applies. And the Carltona principle is that you would be referring to the minister, but it isn't the minister, the individual.
Yeah, you understand that
right.
part.
And so therefore, what has to happen is that the application is made to Commerce. It is for staff by me, then to liaise, and no doubt this can be done electronically with you all, and you ascertain those things that only you know about, whether you got any markets that have space, and if it has space, how much space it has, how soon you can accommodate a vendor in the Bridgetown market, for example, if at all. And then having gone through those exercises, then the license is issued by the minister responsible or the ministry responsible for commerce.
It seems a little lengthy.
It does.
Because in my way of thinking, I think that we could, in my way of thinking, I think if a person wants to sell, we say, at Bridgetown Public Market, that person should approach the management of Bridgetown Public Market to find out if they could vend in Bridgetown Market, rather than go to the Ministry of Commerce, fill out a form, for that form to be sent to us, then for us to say no. I think that we should be able to say no even before the form goes to Commerce.
Well, I can only say to you that the challenge we have had, sir, is the challenge of trying to correct some of the difficulties that arose for several decades in Barbados, where the ministry that you are part of has its own regulatory structure. The ministry that I have the honor to lead has its own structure, and quite frankly, has never had any formal relationship with the vending community, which is another tragedy because, earlier this year, for example, when we had to have the national pause, as it was described, we then were forced to try to find out who were the legitimate vendors in Barbados so that we could offer them assistance. Because we really had no register anywhere to be found that could give us all that we wanted to get by way of information. Now, equally, we have to treat to the ministry responsible for agriculture because they have their own markets and their own formal structure. And as if that were not more difficult enough, we then had to bring on board the National Conservation Commission, who deal with vending on the beaches and on the esplanades and in the parks and gardens around the country. And they have their own statutory arrangements and their own established structure. So that while I take your point, the real difficulty has been, without dismantling all that had existed before, how we could try to pull them together with a view to making this work. Perfection was in danger of becoming the enemy of the good. And so that's why we settled on this approach.
I just think it's a bit.
But I take your point.
The process could be a bit lengthy, though.
I take your point. And I would want.
I mean, but even have a situation where something might slip through the loop and put us in a little bit of trouble. In that you might get, let me say, for instance, you get 200 applications for people to vend at Bridgetown. And then you send them back to us, you might only send back 199. And for some reason, one fellow is given permission to vend at Bridgetown Public Market, unknown to us, and then he comes down there to vend. I mean, I'm just thinking things that can happen. As opposed to us saying from day one, when these 200 people come, we do not have any room here, so it makes no sense in going to the Ministry of Commerce in the first place.
I'm Minister Weir.
Chair, thank you. I've heard the the manager of markets on this matter. I've heard the minister with responsibility for maritime affairs and the economy on it. And I'm now hearing the officer in charge of markets for maritime affairs and blue economy. And they are all on all fours where this matter is concerned. And it seems to me that in order for us to avoid the elongated process of issuing a license, it might be wise to consider what the people who have a day-to-day understanding of how the system works, and that the process should be that the recommendation for the license should come straight from the relevant ministry to the Ministry of Commerce and reduce the elongated process of having to apply for a license, because that is what the people with the experience is telling us.
Minister, may I, Chair?
Minister Humphrey?
Sir, you and I spoke on this matter. You know how I feel. I share the same sentiment. I think the mischief that we were trying to fix and to remedy here, we might end up just making it more so. And the last time I spoke on the matter, I said I cannot think of an instance where we added more bureaucracy and became more efficient. And my thing is that I take the point that we need to have that register, and that you will still have the register if the persons come to the relevant ministries, the information is taken there, and the information then sent on to the Ministry of Commerce, so that which you're seeking to achieve, you still achieve, without causing the unintended negative consequences of complicating matters in terms of the administration of the markets. And I must tell you, sir, and in all honesty, I did not advise Mr. Lewis on this matter. His sentiments are entirely his, but they happen also to be mine. And I think that is born simply from our experience and our involvement intimately in the sector as it stands.
I thank you, Minister, for your comments. Deputy Chief, is there anything that you might wish to add at this stage?
Chair, so when the office was given, this is CPC, the office was given the initial instructions, it was really on the conceit that the ministry responsible for commerce would then be taking over all of the, at least, licensing regime, right? But the operations of the management of the operations of the markets, etc., on the ground would remain with the relevant functionaries. So that was the conceit. But then it began to evolve that each one wanted a say, so that in order to facilitate the say, the unhappy clause 5.2 was reached. So the thing is that came out of a lot of discussion, and I understand that it is not something that everybody wanted, but it was the best that we could come up with at the time. So the only thing that I can think of is probably to suggest that you have some other functionary that could feed the three. NCC would continue under the present regime to regulate. Their part seems to be fine. But those where you're not dealing with the parts, esplanades, etc., perhaps you need like a functionary then that will feed all three, and that way streamline everything. Thank you.
But given the current structure, that functionary would then be still the Ministry of Commerce, because the Ministry of Commerce, effectively what we're saying is that an application is made, submitted, and the fact of the application communicated to the relevant department. Correct?
Yes, Chair. So what would happen is they would make the application to the minister responsible for commerce, and then in the making of the decision to grant the license, he was required to consult with the minister responsible for public markets and the minister responsible for fisheries in the granting of the license. In the initial discussions in the context of the committee, the understanding was that administratively you would come to a harmony, because the bill is not supposed to come into operation right away, and so with that delayed in the commencement, in that time you would put in the necessary administrative framework to allow all three to work together. That was my understanding.
Is it envisaged, Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel, that the form of application set out in the first schedule of the bill can be filled out electronically and submitted electronically?
Chair, those were not things that were discussed. It is not that, I don't think anything stops it from being submitted electronically. And in any case, if it is that the forms need to be calibrated to deal with an electronic format, space is given in the Interpretation Act to make the necessary modifications once you are not adjusting the substance.
Okay. So, Mr. Lewis, I want to take your submission on board as best as possible without doing violence to the work already done. And I'm wondering whether perhaps our challenge here is that we are thinking in the mindset of the 19th and 20th century. If electronic submission can be done, which is not a difficult thing, many people can do an email in Barbados. Most people can, most people do. Sometimes you don't even have to have a computer, you go on your phone in your hand. You fill out the form and you submit it. The form really and truly then is almost instantaneously where it needs to be, because it can be so structured that it goes directly, if it is an application for fisheries, it goes straight to the relevant people in fisheries and at commerce at the same time. I would think that the point the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel is making is that this bill makes provision for us to have a period of time after it passes Parliament to put the necessary administrative arrangements in place to give purpose to this as a living document. Regulations have to be made pursuant to Clause 34, and then the bill comes into operation on a date fixed by proclamation. Now, we could set that date to be a time when we have put all of the necessary arrangements in place. I can tell you another one that off the top of my head must be put in place, because we have to have, for example, appropriate cold storage facilities so that things that are taken up, like fruits and stuff like that, if a vendor has, for whatever reason, to have his produce relocated to another location, and he's not doing it himself, then the state has to take responsibility for it, but can't afford for it to be damaged. So it must be kept at appropriate temperatures and then submitted back to the vendor again. These are things that are going to take us a little bit of time after the passage of this act. So my question to you really is, do you think that if we use electronic technology readily available to us now, we can solve the problem that you're addressing?
Yeah, I think to some extent, but we also have to understand that we are still living in a day and age where many of the fisher folk are not, for want of a better phrase, computer literate, and might have to rely on other persons to deal with that. My main concern though was the long process and the errors that could happen because of the lengthy process.
Okay, okay. It's something that we will have to reflect on, but I thank you. Minister
I would like
Weir.
to speak to
I
that.
recall that this matter came up when we first sat to discuss this statute, and the manager of markets identified the time frames through which a license must or should be granted, given the perishability of certain items. And so therefore, the fact that the officer in charge of fish markets is now pointing out that this is something that will take some nimbleness. We may very well want to reconsider how this is captured, because the reality of it is that either we're going to set some time frames for which a license is issued, or we're going to have to revisit this thing, this section of the act, to make sure that a person with perishable items isn't left with spoilage.
No,
I think that was borne out. So if my memory serves me correctly, the manager of markets was supposed to come back with some recommended time frames.
Yes.
Yes,
Deputy
sorry.
Chief.
Thank you, Minister Weir, for raising that, because as these discussions go along, I make amendments in relation to drafts. So the committee would have received 2 instances of amendments arising out of meetings that we've had. And in the first iteration, I made the amendment to clause 5.2 to say that the license process is supposed to be completed within 7 days. And that was one of the timelines that was identified in the discussion.
Right. And at 5.2, that provision for 7 days is there. And I think that, in my own judgment, that is really in every sense of the word, an outer limit. I go back to the fact that potentially we can use electronic platforms. And I want us to think about life, not as we necessarily see it now, but as it needs to be as we go forward. I hear what you're saying, Mr. Lewis, about there being not a universal ability to use the technology, but in a real sense, that's what friends, family, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife is for. Children, etc., to help those who cannot adequately do it. The point is, we have an ability for that 7-day period to realistically become 7 hours. If we're being very practical about this thing, consultation in the context of what the law requires means that the manager markets, Ms. Lewis, what is your title again? The
Senior manager.
Senior
Manager
manager.
of markets.
And the who would be the person in commerce? It would be you. Yeah. So you're a friend from Black Rock, Mr. Lewis.
Listen, come back.
Yes, you're a friend from Black Rock. Yourself and Mr. Sherlock King are the 3 people who would need to interface with one another. Can't be that hard. Or officers designated by you all. But again, we're really talking about an email arriving on your desk simultaneously as it arrives on Mr. Cumberbatch's desk and Mr. King's desk. If you're talking about a market, that's not a fish market. And it being processed. I don't know that this need become a major issue. It is, in other words, it's no longer, you're not envisaging, as we would have had to have done when I first went into government in 2003, a motor car and a driver come and collect a file and carry that file across to the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy, and then leave from there and go up to the Ministry of Agriculture, up by Graham Hall, and then come back down the road or come back for another day or whatever. This is something now that can be done by moving a mouse and pressing a button.
Minister, Chair, I've heard you, and I don't think we need to belabor the point. We will, in faith, hope that the system so espoused and envisioned is able to deliver that which it says it will do. I'm looking at Mr. Kamanbach. And that we are able to move expeditiously through the matter. So I would advise the senior manager, though I understand his reservations, that we will accept it and move on.
Agreed, Minister. Quick question, though.
Possible for me to speak on this, please?
Sorry, who was that? I heard a voice. I wasn't sure.
I was overlapping.
I beg your pardon, ma'am.
I will let her speak.
Yes, please, Ms. Nichols.
Thank you. Right, so I'm listening to the discussion on this whole matter of licensing and the vendors, and Mr. Lois brought one of the things that I wanted to say to your attention regarding electronic applications and stuff, and I understand that they need to be moving forward in the digital world as it is today. And this is one of the areas that we are right now working with our fisher folk in terms of training and using digital tools to move forward and develop the industry. From listening to the conversation, I'm not certain what I'm missing, but I'm still having a difficulty understanding some of the rhetoric or discussions regarding what it is that y'all are talking about in terms of getting this whole thing pulled together through the different ministries. Just to say that I hope that at the end we don't have a cumbersome, situation where we have, a vendor fisher folk unable to manage the system, so that thought be given to the fact that we have persons who are still challenged and needs to, better understand how to get these things done. Also, I would like to find out is, in terms of applications, is it going to be a first in, first come basis in terms of applications or getting applications in? And then secondly, when persons want to apply for these it's license. When persons want to apply for these license. So the fisheries division that we used to work with in the past, where we would have to take our health certificates after being signed by the manager markets. So that is going to be out completely now. We are not going through that process at all. Because I think that what's missing here is that we are not discussing, I know that we are going forward, but we are not discussing some of the old systems that we used to do to move forward, the changes that, will be coming in terms of accessing this license as we used to do in the past, from fisheries to... So Mr. Lewis is saying everything is going to be done at Commerce.
Chair? Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel is going to speak to this point. Ma'am.
Yes. So not everything has been, can you hear me? Not everything it will be abandoned. So you will recognize that there are certain documents that you need to submit in order to facilitate the granting of the license. So you will still need to, if you are a food vendor, for instance, you're still required to submit the certificate of good health from a registered medical practitioner, and you'll still need to get the license to carry on a food business granted pursuant to the health services food hygiene regulations. So there's still, those requirements have been retained. You also have to remember that if you are operating then within the public market specifically, that you will still have to adhere to those regimes as well. So I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Thank you. Something I had written here from the time it came was about the age limit, and this is more specific to my minister. I brought it up with Mr. Lewis, but I would have wanted to bring it up in this forum. So we have situations where, from time to time, some of the vendors, they have their school-living children, 15. I know that the age limit is 16 for persons being able to come into the market or do the vending. But these persons are thinking that rather than leaving their children home to either get in trouble or do anything, they will want to bring them into the market and allow them to work with them. They're not necessarily vending, but they're assisting maybe in cleaning fish, cleaning the parents' boxes and stuff like that. And to allow for them also to learn, because we're also talking about the development of the fishing industry and bringing younger people into the fishing industry. So while I know that there are laws to govern the way that things are done, we would also want to, to see that avenue is given to these persons who would be interested in coming into the industry, even at that level. So I want to know if there's a place, I don't know if it's in the bill or even just the manager markets or the minister looking at how we can accommodate those persons that will want to help their children. Thank you.
At this point, ma'am, the only thing that I could say to you with respect to what the legislation is contemplating is that we're thinking that the age at which you can legally be doing the business of vending would be brought down to 16 as opposed to 18 where it is now. There are some challenges. I want to tell you that up front. Among them is an existing piece of legislation which says that at 16 you are considered to be too young to contract commercially. And obviously vending at its core is a business, and you are talking about commercial contracts. But I hear what you're saying, and it is a point upon which we will have to reflect. I having said 16 though, you've carried us a little bit further down the road to 15. And I must tell you equally honestly that we had not given any contemplation, any consideration at all to that age. But help me a little bit to help you. How many so would you be talking about? From your experience, what numbers of 15-year-olds find themselves in those circumstances?
They're not many. From time to time, you would find that I don't even think we have, to my mind at this time, where we have 10 persons who have come in. But I know of 1 or 2 persons who you would usually bring, and this is a family. The grandchildren and the children were brought into the fishing industry by the mother, who is also a young person, and I've seen that family grow as a fisher folk family. But what I'm saying is not just about her, but for other persons who might want to do it. But in honesty, there are not a lot of them that I'm talking about. I'm just asking about the provision for that to happen. Right now, we have some younger people coming into the industry, which is good. And for those who really don't know and see, this fishing industry has the persons in this industry now is really aging out, and we don't even see a large amount of younger persons who we can say will be carrying on the baton for this industry unless things change in maybe the next 5-10 years. So, and even for guys who want to go fishing, the fishermen in the industry is also aging out, and there's not this big gap. Young people who's also going fishing, and I think that the system has to look at a way to accommodate them. I understand the laws regarding labor and those kind of things, but if we want to speak to the development of a fishing industry, we also have to see how best we can harness these young people who is interested in being a part of the fishing industry, whether through their parents, and get them on board now.
Ms. Nichols, you are touching a very important chord. And I wonder whether the solution really is not to treat to those children who are no longer in school at 15 by way of finding an avenue for them to be trained. And if the training is going to take them into fishing, then so be it. But I think that what we would be best advised to try to do is to steer them in the direction of developing skills, especially life skills. We have present here a former minister responsible for youth affairs, and I'm going to ask him to share his thoughts on the matter. Minister Ford?
Thanks, Chair. My simple thoughts on the matter are entrained in the fact that through the eons of time, persons in Barbados, like other countries, would allow, by the simple traditions, would allow their offspring to accompany them while they are executing their various vocations. Fishing is one of them. You will find that a carpenter may have a son, and on weekends, he may venture to go with his daddy and either hold the wood and was his kneeling, and that has been part of the Bajan way of life and the Caribbean way of life. We have done it as Christian Barbadians, Muslims do it. Every single religion has their own way and their own industry, and they have allowed their children throughout the years to be part of that industry. It's a way of passing on the baton. What I would say is that from a legal perspective, as it relates to entering into agreements and contracts and payment, I would say, Chair, for us to respect the tenets of the law, that when it comes to payments and the structured system, I suspect that you will have to start those payments after school leaving age, which is after 16 years, where you can enter those legal arrangements for payment. But I don't think you can stop something that has been going on all the time, and it's tradition, and it is giving persons, families, and youngsters in the neighborhood on weekends, as I said, and to have that experience. I don't think that that's something that we could put a stop to in one fell swoop. That's my opinion on it.
Just a reply to Minister. I am not talking about children or allowing children to leave school or come out of school and do this work. I'm mostly talking, and I respect what Minister Ford is saying, and I understand it fully. But it was more speaking to children like who are on holidays, like we have Easter and Christmas and those things when the children have those breaks to come out. It doesn't have to be a legal transition, but just saying allowing them to come. As
I understand you, and you're saying that right now that is not permissible, that you can't say, for example, the same way I may have chosen to take my little son to work and see a little bit, but what I do, you can't take your son to the market.
What I'm saying is that even though in some cases maybe at Bridgetown where children are allowed to do it, for the purposes of the discussions we are having here in terms of the bill and all of these things, that I would want it noted that this is what is allowed, so that when persons decide that they want to do it, then there is not an objection.
I take your point. I take your point.
Chair, probably Deputy CPC can help us in this, because I don't think this is any dissimilar from what happens and it doesn't run foreign to what happens in the different sectors, I think, and the supermarkets, for instance. I remember I was a checkout boy, if you call it that, at 14 years old in the supermarket.
Me too.
And that was during my vacation times. It was not allowed during school, the weekdays, but certainly on Saturdays and Sunday. So I don't know what is the practice, if it is legal or whatever, but it has not been something that is foreign to this country in the way how we operate. So the Deputy CPC will probably be able to have voice on it.
So, Chair, as I said, in drawing the committee's attention to the matter, this is something that exists in the law, and so, to my mind, it needed to be addressed. Either it is that you would have to create a kind of exception, but with the Minors Act hovering, where it would say that if it is that there is a problem, the contract would then be voidable. Or you deal with the age in relation to what is understood by a minor, and we may fall afoul of international agreements there. But then the other thing is simply to deal with just putting the age at which you can get the license at 18, but perhaps there may be a mechanism that we can put in place to create a kind of training or apprenticeship kind of program. This could probably be done via regulations, so that you can find a scheme for them to be trained, but also perhaps then to receive remuneration rather than salary on a technical point. Do you understand where I'm coming from, Chair?
I do.
Thank you.
I do. I think that the bottom line is, Ms. Nichols, that you have made an important observation, and this is something that may actually go outside the scope of this bill, but it is worthy of some consideration, because I think we really want to be encouraging our young people, and as you said, if it is in summer, Easter vacation, and that type of thing, there's really no reason why we should not be encouraging them to be exposed and to learn and to yearn for an opportunity to participate. Like Minister Ford, I had the same type of experience. I had to go and pack some bags in the supermarket and thing. That's correct, and get some good tips too. But I'm not sure that we can accommodate it within this legislation, but it is worth looking at more broadly. Are there any other requests? I think Minister Cummins, you had wanted the floor at one point.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've come to the conclusion that I would have recommended in any event. Thank you to the Deputy CPC and your guidance. But I think the broader question, Chairman, is that there are a number of recommendations that have been made by sectoral representatives and by presenters to this committee that I think are worthy of noting, even though they fall outside of the scope of the provisions of this bill. So, for example, the role to be played in a developmental way for youth. It is not just about children coming or youth coming during the summer holidays or in their holidays, whichever ones they may be, and being a part of what their families are doing. Even in international trade law for international intellectual property, you're talking about passing on ancestral knowledge, and that is a tradable commodity that I think we have a responsibility to harness by way of ancillary policy supporting this legislation. Earlier in the session this morning, there was another recommendation which I believe you, Chair, may have inadvertently helped to spawn, which spoke about in African countries where you have large markets and multiple people selling much of the same thing, and how that was then created. In my mind, it created an opportunity for us to treat to the question of cooperative buying and distribution and the distributive and the wholesale trading, and how we can help to take our traders and our vendors into more corporate forms of business from where they start, and how we can support that evolution through the development of policy. And so I think, Chairman, that under your leadership and under the guidance of the ministry, perhaps a number of the recommendations to which I've spoken about already and others which I have not specifically mentioned can be incorporated into additional recommendations for the development of broad policy guidelines that can help to develop vending as an industry in the third decade of the 21st century in a way that allows it to be genuinely developmental and ultimately to lend itself to the dignity of which we've all spoken over the past 2 weeks, Chairman. So that would be my recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Minister. Colleagues, are there any other? Senator Wiggins, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a very small point to something Ms. Nichols said in terms of filling out the forms online. I don't think that should be a problem because filling out a form for an American visa is like the most difficult thing anybody can do online. And lots of people who want to apply for that visa find a mechanism to get it done. So I don't think that we should put stumbling blocks in the way if we decided that these forms should be done electronically, because like I said, if you want a US visa, you get it done. You find somebody who can assist you and you get it done. So I think that in all of our business transactions, because we spoke to the whole question of technology usage and Wi-Fi and everything. So I think that all vendors should decide that they want to come on board when it comes to technology. And I think that this would be a very good way to begin. So I would advise not to let this be a stumbling block in terms of moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Minister Humphrey.
Thank you, sir. So in response to Senator Wiggins, it is true many persons apply for the visa, but that a visa application now probably presents the worst example of the horrors of trying to use technology. The truth is, I suspect it is that difficult not because they want to let people in. And that I do not know that we should use that as the standard by which to gauge the markets, because the reality is it is a very challenging process for a visa. And I'm sure they have their reasons for making it so challenging. But I suspect, in terms of the substance of the discussion, it is not only about the technology. And I feel as if we've diverted there unnecessarily. I do not think it's only about the technology. I think the argument that the persons who are in the industry are making, those in agriculture, whether it's the minister or the manager or myself or my senior manager, and the representative from Barnufo, is this the best practice to go through commerce, more so than the technology itself? The technology is just a tool. So we're not questioning the tool necessarily, but is this the best approach in terms of handling the persons in the industry?
Am I mistaken, Minister? Or I seem to recall that you had just agreed that we would...
Yes, but we were still on the topic, so I'm saying I've agreed with it, and I'm still putting it on the table, sir. While I've agreed to allow us to pursue the matter, I just want to be very clear that it is not only about the technology.
Okay.
And while I would accept that we need to press on, because we all do need to press on, I do not want the records to be mistaken and reflect that we are proposing that is only a technology issue. It really is not.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other requests for the floor among the colleagues present?
I got one.
No?
On the schedule 64, I note the National Vending Committee, and I made a note here that there is no representative from the Fishing Association on this committee.
And that is agreed. I must tell you, ma'am, that it was an oversight. I think it had been drawn to our attention sometime earlier in our deliberations this week. So please do not let your heart be troubled about that. Barnufo, as with, I think there was one other. the Rastafari community, yeah, were supposed to be added to this list.
And I have one thing here again on the A schedule. What happened is that I had made a note of it, but since the document was printed, I'm not seeing everything that I had noted. But I want a little clarity on the wording. I don't know if it is the way it is or if there can be some clarity, but noting the thing here, manager of markets may let market stalls. I'm not seeing the full wording of what it was because it's printed over. At 25, A schedule, I'm looking at the number 2 under the Marketing Slaughterhouse Act, number 2.
Trying to find it. Bear with me.
A schedule.
Yes, schedule.
I am on page 69.
Page 69.
Sorry.
Yes.
Under Marketing Slaughterhouse Act,
Right.
number 2, which is manager of markets may let market stalls. I was reading that and I had a difficulty getting it put together. So I don't know if it's just the language of which the document speaks or if it is another way. But I'm not seeing the full thing because something's printed over it.
Chair?
Chief
But
Parliament.
just like some clarity to the wording.
Understand, I'm going to ask the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel, who is the drafter of the legislation, to speak to the matter, please. Deputy Chief, the floor is yours.
Yes, Chair. So the original wording would have spoken to the word let, and that's where it comes from. Where there's departure is in the Markets and Slaughterhouses Act. It didn't refer to the national vending legislation. So what you're seeing in the 8th schedule is what it will be once this legislation is passed. So in the original legislation, it says, subject to the provisions of these regulations, the chief supervisor may, on the payment of the appropriate rent as set out in the 1st schedule, let to any approved person in any market stall in any public market. Sorry, Chair, were you gonna?
No, and I was just going to, in the event that the challenge was with the term let, I invite you to explain what that term let means there.
It would be to lease.
Right.
Or, right, yeah, so, and then what you see in the 8th schedule is what is proposed to replace it. Again, it used the word let because it is reflecting what was originally there. But I don't know if the suggestion then is perhaps to use other terminology rather than the word let.
I'm not sure that that's the suggestion. I thought that we were being invited to clarify what it meant. Ms. Nichols?
Yes, sir. I wanted the clarity because what I had written down as a note was, can this language be made clearer?
Yes. So. Okay. Yeah. When it says they're let to a person, it really means lease to a person. But for some reason, we lawyers tend to make language a lot more difficult than they need to be. But that's essentially what it is. That's the old English way of putting it.
Thank you.
Yes. So in other words, you're going to lease to a person licensed as a vendor the stall, or lease the stall to a person licensed as a vendor, rather. Did you have any other matters that you wanted to raise with us, Ms. Nichols? Ms. Nichols? Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I said I can't remember. There were some things in my head, but they're gone. But I hope that during the time that we have to for me to meet with the fisher folk and I go back through this whole document with them, that given the opportunity to come back, I would have, if there's need to bring up anything else that I see in the document that needs any clarity or explanation, that I would be able to do so.
Well, ma'am, I gonna confess here now that I want you to be able to have your meeting with your constituents. I think all of us who are in representative capacities understand the vital importance of that. That is the lifeblood of a democracy. I was hoping, because a lot of our time next week is going to be consumed by the technology which allows this place to function and the staff who support it, having to be all moved to the LESC, where we're going to have the election of the President of the Republic take place on Wednesday. And then, of course, everybody got to come back down and the technology got to be moved back down. So I don't think any business can realistically be done, as I'm made to understand, before Friday next week. Now, Friday next week is a date that has already been blocked by the leader of the opposition. He's chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, and I am chairman of this committee. But I'm going to talk to the leader of the opposition, my friend, and see whether he can be persuaded to accommodate us. He may not be minded to do that, but I have found that from time to time, speaking to the good bishop, you can appeal to his his better sensibilities. But we will see, ma'am. What I want to do, though, is to tell you that please treat to the matter of consultation with some dispatch. We will come back to you in one way, shape, or form, and we will be able to give you the opportunity to share with us your findings. Brother Lewis.
Yes, Chair.
Are there any other matters that you want to raise with us?
Yes. There's a culture in markets that we might have to use a little bit of discretion. I'm talking in terms of the management of markets. We allow fishermen to sell fish sometimes, and these fishermen would not have a seller's license, but they would have a fisherman's license. So I'm just advising the committee about that element. Sometimes the fisherman may bring a load of fish and he may not be able to get them sold at the price that he wants, and there has always been, facilities for the fisherman to sell his fish. Would that still be able to? Can we still have that practice without contravening the regulation? Or there are situations where fishermen may bring in jacks, and they may put a whole load of jacks on the back of a truck and go through the country selling. And they're not traditional vendors, they're fishermen, but they need to get the fish sold.
There's provision in the license for an occasional vendor's there's provision in the legislation for an occasional vendor's license to be obtained. If a fisherman consciously wants to put his jacks onto a vehicle and go through the country selling, I think he would be better advised to secure the occasional license. In circumstances, that's a different example to the one you gave first.
Right, yeah, I gave you two.
Right, and the one that you gave first really is a little bit more taxing for me. I want to say, yes, we can accommodate, but I'm not sure how we can accommodate. And it may well have to be that the fishermen in those circumstances may have to enter into a private arrangement with a licensed vendor that they sell and they do some profit sharing. But I don't want to say that without having thought it through. Yeah, so I'm just sharing with you my initial reaction to it.
I understand, but it's not as simple as that. Vernell would tell you, if a fisherman comes in and the fish being sold at $2 a pound, for example, and he does not believe that it merits $2 a pound, that he wants $3 a pound, some of them we allow someone then to go to the front of the market, and sell the fish.
No, but you see, this is the danger, though, Brother Lewis, of allowing too much informality to creep in.
But I said that was a cultural, kind of like a cultural norm.
I understand. I understand. So therefore, the fisherman in those circumstances benefits because he is able to sell alongside the vendor who had to have a license, but he ain't got no license. All he has is a permission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he may not be comfortable selling his fish to a vendor at $2 a pound, and then the vendor selling the fish at $4 a pound.
I agree
He
with
may
you.
prefer to go out and sell his fish at $4 a pound and get all the money for himself.
And then the flip side of that coin, of course, is that there may be some vendors who may be very unhappy that they have to pay a fee or a license, the money for a license in order to sell. And here's this fisherman who has not had to do that, and he could do the same thing I'm doing.
Who catch the fish?
Well, yeah.
I just say we mention that because I know that is a question that will come up sometime along the line.
You know, part of this, we can come to you now, Mr. Prescott. Part of this is that we're trying to bring order and structure. And it has not been an easy journey. But this is something else that we will have to turn our minds to. But I thank you for raising it. Minister Prescott wanted the floor. Sorry, Mr. Prescott wanted the floor.
Well, I'm just saying that it was referred to as this practice by fishermen was referred to as a norm, a cultural norm, and I didn't hear anyone say that as it stands now, it causes any conflict. I don't see why you have to regulate it and put it into law, and that as a consequence of doing that, it would create some conflict when we have already seen it being practiced for a considerable period of time, and it is accepted among the various agencies there, the retail sellers. It is done in agriculture. In agriculture, sometimes a man plants food, and he's the planter, but he also sells the food as though he's a retailer in the circumstances, and it doesn't cause any problem. It is part of a cultural practice, and obviously sanctioned by the society itself already. I don't think we need to put something like that into law. I'm just saying so.
I think that you don't want some overzealous policeman to stop a truckload of jacks in the country and ask the men if to go have any license. So because I know that question will be asked.
And I want to say to you that my profession tells me that we can't do a formal thing in an informal way. And that is perhaps how we find ourselves in these difficulties. I take what Mr. Prescott has said, but the truth of the matter is that long after I am gone and he is gone, there will be a reason for somebody to say, why am I asked to pay a fee in order to sell, or why is this person allowed to sell alongside me but he is not paying a fee? And these difficulties we will find ourselves confronting and would have no proper answer. Law is about certainty and the consistent application of that certainty. So it is an issue that we have to look at, and I want to thank you for raising it for us. Now, equally, I want to thank all three of you for coming and sharing with us your thoughts. I think it has been a valuable exchange. I know, Ms. Nichols, that you probably are going to have to spend a little bit more time with us, but Ms. Holder and Mr. Lewis, I am indebted to you. We have colleagues waiting on the outside, representatives of the Association of Vendors, Wayside Vendors, and I am going to therefore thank you, Mr. Lewis, thank you, Ms. Holder, and you also, Ms. Nichols, for the time you've spent with us and the assistance you've given to this committee. We are grateful to you. And I would ask you now to vacate the room that you're now in. We will take a short adjournment for 5 minutes, no more, suspension for 5 minutes, no more, so that we can then pay attention to the necessary COVID-19 directives and have the others come in, and then we continue. So once again, thank you very much, folks. May I have a motion for suspension for 5 minutes, please?
I beg to so move.
Thank you.
By the second.
Thank you, Minister Cummins and Minister Ford. We stand suspended. Colleagues, can we come back to order, please? There's a matter that has arisen which requires that I ask for the committee's cooperation. I would want to leave the chair for about 5 minutes and then return. I wouldn't want that to delay the business of the committee, however. So I'm going to ask for, invite a motion that will allow us to have an interim chair. Could I have such a motion, please?
The motion is that we have an interim chair until the official chair returns.
And do you have any name, Minister Ford, that you would want to propose?
I asked that Minister Kurt Humphrey acts as interim chair until the prominent chair returns.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Beg to second, Chair.
Thank you, Minister Cummins. Are there any dissenting voices? None? Therefore, I will briefly hand the chair to you, Minister.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all. I will carry out the duties as chair temporarily until the substantive chairman returns. It is my understanding that we have with us Mr. Keith Franklin and Ms. Juliette Moore of the Association of Bayside Vendors. Are you here?
Good evening.
Are your microphones working? Just speak into the microphone, please.
Press. Yes?
Okay.
Good evening.
Thank you so kindly for joining us on this conversation of the Joint Select Committee on the National Vending Bill. I trust that you've had opportunity to review the bill, or at least have heard some of the conversation as it relates to the bill. And we are very thankful that you are here with us to speak to some of the issues in the bill. You would appreciate that we've already had with us Barvin, who spoke to matters of concern for them in the bill. We've also had your immediate predecessor would have been Barnufo, who also spoke to some of the issues in the bill as it relates to fisheries. And so we are thankful that you are here with us. I will give you this opportunity to say any opening remarks. If you wish to speak specifically now or not is entirely up to you, but the floor is open to you to make your opening remarks. And after that, I will invite the other members of the committee to raise questions if they have any questions so to raise. Thank you. In the beginning, please state your name and your position within your organization, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Keith Franklin, President of Bayside Vendors Business Association. Issues. Some of the main issues is like the fees that you have to pay for the licensing and the areas and that you're going to be vending.
Keith, you may want to pull the microphone down a little bit so that you're a little clearer.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
The areas that you're going to be vending. How long or how much? Because you see some may mark $25 for a permit. Is how
long the permit will be valid?
If it's a year or 2 years. I see also $100 also for a permit. These areas we would like to look at.
I am not sure that I captured everything you said, Keith. So the length of time and the fees and what were the other concerns? Sorry?
Yeah, that's concern.
That's it.
Were there other concerns? Is that it? The length of time and the fees?
That's it.
Were you able to capture anything other than that, CPC? I will invite the Deputy CPC to speak, please.
Yes, sorry. So what I was able to write down were the concerns related to the fees for the license, the vending zones and the areas that have been chosen, selected as vending zones, how long, I think there would be, it relates to you have the license, the length of the license time, and then also the permits and the licenses, the fees relating to the permits and the fees, that there was a difference. Some have 25, some have 50, some have 100, some have 150. So there were concerns there. So that's what I was able to write. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Franklin. Are there more concerns? Any other questions?
There's more questions. The areas and certain areas that we're talking about vending, like outside this area of vending, we would like to know the name of these areas and things like that.
Okay. Thank you so kindly, Ms. Moore. Would you like to add anything? I see the substantive chair has returned. I was beginning to enjoy this role, and therefore I would now vacate and allow the substantive chair to chair.
Good evening.
Yeah, but Ms. Moore, please, your concerns.
Yes. Good evening. I am a new member of the Vending Association. Basically, a lot had to do with the questions that Mr. Franklin posed earlier, as in not only the fees, but questions as like the fees pertaining to, it's hard enough as it is. A person has a small garden in the back, and can I come up to the front of my house and peddle my ware right there? You have for temporary vending, which is $25. If you can clarify that for me as far as temporary vending sites. I get that it's not where you have prescribed people to vend, but would that mean then that I wouldn't be able to no longer come up to the side of my house and sell my fruits and sell my water if I choose to? And the question as to the license, how long do they last? Like, do I pay $25 every time I want to go and just sell water? Or did that go for a month, or I go for a year, or I go for however? I gather that you got to pay because you use the light, you use the water, you need places to maintain these sites that you say you can vend, but some of them could do with a good set of maintenance still too. I think that was basically my concern as far as the monies to pay to vend, because I figure vending was originally a poor man's thing, and I don't know if everybody can afford the 100, the 150 at the times needed to adjust, So I think that's probably a couple more, but I'm still a little nervous, so a couple more things. But for right now, that's basically it. The monies to be paid, the temporary vending sites, if you could explain that. And yeah, that's basically it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Ms. Moore.
Yes, please.
Kerry Simmons. I am the substantive chair of the committee.
Yes, sir.
I only caught part of the question, so I wouldn't attempt to pilot you through everything. But I do want to put your heart at ease. If you're talking about selling from next to your house or within the confines of your premises, the committee has already accepted that that is not something that we would want to include in the reach of the legislation. So that should not be an issue.
So the
right?
yeah.
What are the arrangements you're talking about? You sell from in front of your house? That's what it is?
No, what I'm asking is, you have a temporary license for the price of $25, which is not temporary. You have, if you're vending outside of the vending zone, like the normal church or whatever the case, like, you know, the school fair or you don't have them anymore, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
Say, as in, you know, the guy who sells his water in the middle of the road there going up to the stoplights. The guys who sell on the, and I know for sure that's not a vending zone. Yeah?
Yeah.
Would he have to pay $25 to do that? And if he has to, how long would that permit last?
Chair?
Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel, can you assist us?
Chair, so I will highlight the issues that I believe Mr. Franklin and Ms. Moore spoke to. So in relation to fees for license, okay, so it's important for everyone to understand that the licensing regime refers to those vendors who are going to be vending for a living, right? So that those are the persons who would then be required to get a license. The persons then who would be vending at a fair or farmer's market or carnival or cultural or a recreational kind of event, like a fun event, those are referred to as persons who will engage in occasional vending, and those people will have to apply for a permit. The license fees then, for those who are dealing with doing vending for a living, if you are vending on a beach or an esplanade or a garden or park, $100. The renewal is $100. And if you are vending, if you're not vending on a beach, esplanade, garden, or park, that will be $100, and renewal would be $100. And if you are vending on a beach or esplanade, then you would have to pay $150. And if you're renewing for those areas, then it would be $100. For the occasional vending, for those who are dealing with fairs, etc., they have to pay the permit fee of $50. And for those not operating on the beach, they would pay $25. So I was wondering, Mr. Franklin and Ms. Moore, do you understand the arrangements in the way that I would have explained, or do I have to go further?
I understand the arrangements, but also looking at the price, the $100 and the $150, I think that is way too much.
The $100 though, Mr. Franklin, is for a year, huh?
A year.
A year. So in other words, it translates into $8.33 a month.
Excuse me. That's the question we were asking as to how long the license lasts for. When would it have to be renewed? And I don't know if my question has been answered. I don't know. The guy who sells his water in the middle of the road, does he pay $25? And if he pays $25, when does he have to renew it? Because he's selling that water every day in that site. That's the question. I don't know if I put myself over.
No, you're very clear to me. Your question really is, how long does the occasional vending license last for?
The occasional vending license only lasts for the duration of the event. So occasional vending is supposed to take place in a certain context, and that is for specific events.
So
sorry.
Once again,
yes.
So which means the guy who is selling his water right there, he would be illegal. He would be considered illegal then.
Yeah, he would need to know to sell within a vending zone. In other words, sell it in the middle of the road.
Well, not the road per se. I put it that way, but
I understand.
there's a patch there, grass, and it's convenient, so when you move him from there, because it's going to be illegal, granted he's making money there, because that's where the traffic is, that's where the people is. It is not unsafe because there's no accident there yet, but you can't wait for it to happen, mind you. Mr. Franklin was asking as to when you move him from there where he's making money, where are you going to put him? Where is he to go? And he's to go in the sites that you have put for him, yeah?
The intention is to have some vending zones created all about the island. And what we would want to do is to consult with vendors who are going into the vending zones, because we want to make sure that, remember, if you looked at this piece of legislation, one of the things we're trying to do is to make sure that you're going to a space that is conducive for you to make money, not just move you and shove you anywhere at all. No, but I want to take you up on the point you're making, because there is some truth to the fact that, let's use an example. Coming down the hill from, if you coming down past Parkinson School, going down the hill, you pass CBC, obviously, Parkinson School, you're going down the hill, you get to the roundabout where you find some guys who are selling a variety of things, because I've bought a variety of things there in the line of traffic. Sometimes it is Aki, sometimes it is other things. Truth is, they would be asked to go into a vending zone, because they are right now, if you remember where I'm talking about, they would be right now in the line of traffic. As traffic stops, the guys move in between the cars and do a quick brisk trade and then move out again. Yeah? Now, the difficulty there is that it presents, I know we've been fortunate, but the truth is it does present a hazard to the vehicles and to themselves. So in an effort to bring some sort of safer environment and some sort of order to the business of selling, you want to have a vending zone. We had the Ministry of Public Works with us earlier today, who were recommending, for example, right next door, there's an open space there across from what is now, what's the name of the coffee place? I can't even remember. Starbucks. And so we're trying to move people from in the line of traffic and in the danger of being at risk physically to themselves or to other people. The vending zone, that is what it is about, and then it is intended to be obviously a place where you have running water and bathroom facilities and lighting and all of those other things, so that you're not limited because you got to stop selling because it get dark, etc., etc. The person who is doing that, to answer your question directly, would be doing so not as an occasional vendor, but doing it for a living. And he would be required, therefore, to pay the proposed fee of $100, which I was saying to Mr. Franklin translates into $8.30-something a month. That would be an annual fee for the license. The Chief Parliamentary Counsel, the lady you just spoke to, she is the person who is assisting us with the drafting of this legislation. And she was making the other point that there are people who would be vending occasionally. And for the purposes of this legislation, vending occasionally means that you have a school fair, for example, or you got Gold Cup Day at the Garrison, or you got Crop Over, and you get a license because you want to sell during that particular event, or on that particular day, or on those particular days. When the event is finished,
that.
Right,
I understand.
Right. So those permits would be $50 for the duration of the period. Sorry, $50 if you're doing it on a beach, $25 if you're doing it outside of a beach or esplanade. Before Minister Cummins speaks to you, I just want to make sure you were comfortable with that explanation.
That's basically what I wanted to know, the duration. And the last one was more of not a complaint, but more of a suggestion. as in to be very, where you put these sites for people to sell food, to vend, because you see areas, I walk and I go down Brandon City Beach, you got a big amount of stalls and you seldom see anybody down there doing anything, because it's like they're down a hole, like, you know what I mean? So, I mean, please be it's not, I don't know a word to put it without sounding horrible, but, well, I can try not to.
No, be real.
Like,
You
be very considerate, be very careful,
yes.
and very considerate where you put people to vend. Because you move them, yes, to keep them safe off the roads, I get that, and you want the roads safe, but please don't put them in a position now where then the money they're going to make, their livelihood dead, but they're safe. Still can't feed the children, but, you know, these things can get like down on the odd day, that kind of way.
And I appreciate that point. And I was actually, I wanted to actually read the party legislation to you. It's just that I can't find it right now, but I can look for it. Before you leave there, I can read this to you. Because it does require that you all have the benefit of the discussion before we do any changing of locations and stuff like that. Bear with me while I allow Minister Cummings to ask a couple of questions, and I'll come back to you, ma'am, while I read through this again.
Thank
Minister
you, Chairman.
Cummings?
I actually was not asking questions
Sorry.
of the wayside vendors, although their questions have triggered one for me, and so I'm asking it of you, perhaps, and the Deputy Chief Parliamentary Counsel. Now, Ms. Moore raised the question about the occasional vending license. And when I look back at the legislation, Chairman, it is something that is a query that has popped up for me. A fair may be an annual event, and so you may apply for a permit for a fair one time, and it expires based on the legislation here saying it exists, it will be valid for the duration. But we live in a country now, Chairman, where every single week there are locations in this country where there are farmers markets. And people come out and they vend and they bring not just agricultural produce, but they bring craft, candles, jewelry, bread, baked goods, those kinds of things. And that's something that you could depend on a Saturday morning, on a Sunday morning in different parts of the country. Brighton Farmers Market, Holders Farmers Market, down at the Glebe. And I just wanted to get a sense, because if we're talking about a farmers market as defined by practice, having an occasional permit for a weekly event may become prohibitively expensive, and I'm just flagging it as something that perhaps may need to be taken out of the question of duration of the event and maybe put into the category of annual, depending on what kind of event we're talking about.
Well, I think, though, Minister, that your point is taken, and that's one of the things that were considered. The fact of the matter is that this issue of occasional licenses has long been a burden for vendors. I could take you into Oystins, and I ain't gonna call the names of any of the people who spoke to me, but there were some people who have had historically every week, every Friday, you gotta go to the magistrate's court, for example, to get a refresher. And that was true of liquor licenses too, by the way. Every week I go and get a fresh one. So what we are trying to do is to say, look, you can have an occasional license, which would be $25 if it is not on a beach, and that is one event. If you're going to do this every single weekend, 52 weeks a year, or however often, but you want to be at Brighton's Farmers Market almost every time the weekend come along, it may work out to be more economical for you to spend the $100 as opposed to $25 every week, in which case you just get the other license, but the choice will be for you, because you will know whether you're doing this as a one-off or whether you're doing this here more as a way of sustaining livelihood.
Chairman, then that has implications for the designation of vending zones. Because a farmer's market as an occasional event or a weekly event would then have to be so designated in order for that annual license to be applicable, not so?
Deputy Chief, what's your view on that?
Okay.
Did the minister lose you?
Yeah, okay. Because the license doesn't depend on the event. It more depends on the status that you are pursuing. So once it is that you are trying to do it for a living, then that is the context in which you get the license. But if it is that you are aiming to sell at a particular event or in a particular context, then it is the occasional. So that's the conception, or I guess the conceit. But what you're talking about now is sounding a little different. So could you explain it again?
So Chairman, if I can put it in context, I'm not a very early morning person, but I like the early morning farmers markets. And there are people who have small businesses. They bake breads, really great local artisanal breads, for example. They work elsewhere, or they have businesses set up elsewhere. But because there are people who will come out on a Saturday morning to a given location, they will set up their stall and they will come, they will bring their wares, and you can purchase your things there. They're going to pay an admissions fee to the location for the purpose of having that stall set up and the facilities associated with that. What we're here saying now is that they either have to be categorized as an occasional vendor because they're coming to an event which begins and ends, or they are qualified as a permit holder for a year, even though the event is not continuous throughout the week. It only happens once a week. So if I'm reading the legislation strictly, I'm going to think that a farmer's market is a limited term event and I have to apply for an occasional permit. I'm not going to assume, based on the reading of the legislation, that my appearance on a weekly basis at the farmer's market and my activities being engaged in outside of the farmer's market for the rest of the week are in any way connected. I'm just saying that we're creating a gray area that may need some clarification. If I am that vendor coming to a farmer's market only on a weekly basis and it's categorized here for the duration of that event, I wouldn't automatically think that I can file for a permit for a year.
Chair, well, I guess I thought that the chair had contextualized it in saying that rather than you seeing yourself then as an occasional vendor, you then would be put into the other regime, which would be the licensing regime. And that way you would be able to operate normally.
If I can suggest, Chair, that may be an interpretation that, with your explanation, I can accept in principle, but the interpretation of the legislation as resting with day-to-day administrators may not necessarily be so clear. And we would not want to create any lack of clarity at all in the actual wording of the legislation. And so we would want to ensure that anybody picking up the legislation is clear that for circumstances where an event takes place on a weekly basis, that we are not saying to the public of Barbados that every single week they're going to pay an admissions fee to the farmers market to have their stall, and they're going to apply to the government for a permit because your permit lasts, according to the legislation, for the duration of the event only. And we would have to have that clarified expressly.
Chair, well, perhaps too, maybe it is more that you may have to take out farmers market out of the conception of occasional vending, because I suppose too, when we were having the discussion, you wanted to target those events or happenings that were temporary in concept, and so this concept of the farmers market was then tossed in with the festivals, tossed in with the religious events. But perhaps it is not appropriate for farmers market to be here. Just saying. Thank you.
Well, I must tell you that I was just thinking entrepreneurially, and I suspect that every entrepreneur put in the position of having to make a choice will make the choice that I suggested. But I hear you, Minister. The concern is whether you should pay $25 every time there's a farmer's market, or whether you could find a way of treating to that differently.
Chairman,
Yes.
I just want to say, and following on from Minister Cummings, is that, and I understand her point perfectly, but I don't know if we can legislate. I remember the words of my good friend in here, he's overseas now, former Minister Glenn Clark. You can't legislate a culture. And I think that as much as we say take out the farmers market from it, there may be those persons who turn up at the farmers market just once, because the occasion may merit it. And for those persons who just turn up once or twice a year, because it just happened to be the opportunity for them, what will happen to those persons if you take it out? So I don't think you can do anything. I think that just with it, as the chair said, using basic common sense, it may not be dollars and cents, but just common sense now, that when you look at your bottom dollar, you recognize that if I buy one temporary license, it's $25, as opposed to paying $100 that I can find every single week if I choose to. So it comes down to making a choice based on the expenses incurred in terms of the license, and I think you should really take it out. That's the honest truth, because you're creating another problem now for those persons who only are vending once or twice in the farmers market.
Chairman, I hear my colleague, and I take the point about not wanting to exclude those persons who, for instance, as we prepare for Christmas, they may come out only at this time of the year with their decorations, and they may only want to have an occasional permit. But I would be very hesitant to use language of let's use common sense when dealing with legislation and the bureaucracy. Many a person have been frustrated dealing with the bureaucracy and dealing with permissions and the administrative system. And this very legislation, in its spirit and its intent, is designed to facilitate. And if we don't make it perfectly clear what our intentions are, then I'm not certain that those who are charged with the responsibility on a day-to-day basis of interpreting it will be in a position to facilitate those that we intend to so do.
May I ask, Minister, from your experience, what is your view about the attendance at farmers markets? Do you consider them to be well attended?
Quite so, Chair.
Right. And I am mindful that's my experience too, and I am mindful of what the gentleman from Barvin cautioned us against, which is to say that they wanted themselves to be seen as businessmen and did not want to be treated as though they were being given a handout. $25 is what we're talking about here for a license to participate in a well-attended farmer's market on average. Is that prohibitive?
Chairman, I'm not sure that the issue is whether it is prohibitive. It is the notion of a person in 2021 having to apply for a license every single week and make that payment every single week. That is prohibitive and it's bureaucratic. I don't think that's the intention, and I'm not thinking that that's what you are saying either. My own thought of it, Mr. Chairman, is that for those persons who are genuinely occasional vendors and are going to places like farmers markets genuinely occasionally, that regime may remain in place. But I would want us under the regime of the annual permit to specify that there is the option to which you referred, Chairman, where a person appearing at a weekly event on a consistent basis has the option of using their discretion to choose whether they're going to turn up occasionally and pay $25 when they choose, or they're going to choose to pay $100 for the year, even for an event like a farmer's market. But if we pigeonhole that specifically and limit it to an occasional license, it's not going to be so clear.
And you'll be licensed then to be at Brighton's Farmers Market every Sunday from January to December. No problem at all with that. And I believe, Deputy Chief, that makes sense. It will help us to get rid of what Minister Cummings calls a gray area. Are there any members who have a dissenting view? Good. Now, Senator Holder, you have caught my eye. The floor is yours.
Sir, I am very glad that I caught your eye. The only challenge is that my hand wasn't raised.
Your hand is raised. Oh, sorry, from where I sit, I see your hand up. What's that there? That's not
You do?
I beg your pardon. That apparently seems to be the mouse, not your hand. So the Zoom is playing Bo Peep with me.
Okay. If you were waiting
no
me to make a comment, sir.
But no, if you want to have the floor, it's yours. You know, I'm not forcing you to. I thought that you were asking. Okay, Miss Moore. Then can I come back to you, please? I had promised you that I would share with you the thinking of the legislation at this point. We are talking about a few things in here. If you have it, do you have the legislation in front of you, ma'am?
Yes, I do.
Right. So if you go to page 23, all right. It should say page 23, part 5, rights and obligations of vendors. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you come down to number 3, we were talking about vendors being subject to a relocation notice. So these are the things that we want to introduce in an effort to make it a more fair and transparent system, working more in the interest of the vendors' commercial interests than it has ever done before. So we were talking about, first of all, giving you 30 days notice before any relocation is forced upon you. So you know a month in advance, well, look, this is what is developed, this is what is being proposed. Secondly, to consult with you in respect of any assignment of a new site or location in relation to carrying out the vending business. And that if you are assigned to a new site, it will be one which is conducive to the carrying on of the vending business. So that we recognize that these things do not now exist, and that there's a long history. Barvin has shared with us some of the troubled times that vendors have had to go through when, far from being consulted, they were relocated at the brute force of the police establishment. And what we're trying to do now is to find a way of treating you as you should be treated as business people who must plan, who must structure your arrangements accordingly, who need to have some idea of where it is that you're going and have some input into the decision that is being made with respect to how the business that you're doing is to be run. Is that fair enough?
What would I would let you...
That is understandable.
Okay.
It's fair.
Okay.
Ms.
Moore?
Just 30 days notice before you get your notice. Okay, merchandise. What you have here sounds really good, and you say to be treated like business people, and I get that. That sounds all well and good on paper, but the average vendor that can come out there, unless they've been doing this thing for a while, even the farmers in the farmers mart still got they say they want to be treated like business people. I get that, because my son, he do a little thing and he says you got to plan before you plant. But sorry for that. The average person who comes out and start to vend, if I remember good, vending came from our old granny who come down and brought her stuff down, and she set up something and she started to vend. I get that we going forward and we want to go forward, yeah? But these young guys out there, I say young because I got 3 boys' daughters, so I going young. These young people who are now starting this vending, I don't know if their mind can, I don't know if the words is what's got me. I don't know if these young people who now starting to do this vending, I would suggest then some kind of class or some kind of something because vending is no longer a poor people's thing, seeing as that you have to pay a permit, and you just know you can go pay taxes, and you can go do all kind of different things. So vending is no longer going to be a market for the average poor person.
No, Miss Moore, don't do Miss so.
But look where you're going. It used to be that you had your ware, you come and you sell it, and you make your money, and you support your family. And I get that we're going forward. I get that you got to improve as you go on. I just feel that you guys make these rules. I get you got to do this as the government to make things happen and to make people's life better. Please, don't these things, people who make these rules, come out 2 months and vend. Go and see what's going on. Don't just let me come and say things and want to go with them and then want to make that. Come and see. People are not, I ain't saying that the many intelligent people out there, but you got people vending out there, and the only thing they're good at doing is counting that money. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. I just...
No, I'm hearing you. I think that what you're trying to caution us against something, but I want you to take your time and
right. I want
no
you to
pressure. There's no pressure.
We
can be here most of the evening.
No, I can't be here most of the evening. And Mr. Franklin got to do his thing, and he got to say what he got to say too. So what I can try to get as quick as to put it in is come out and see what's going on. Really have conversations with these people, and as the beautiful lady said,
which one? I'm surrounded by them.
She's dark like me. She's dark like me.
Oh, she's dark like you.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Be careful in make it that. I was told that it is not when the person who says, you tell somebody something and they don't understand, you say them and get it. But really and truly, you have not put it across in a manner that I can understand. You get what I say?
Yes.
So this here now, I might be able to understand this, Mr. Franklin might be able to understand this, but the average person on the street, they're not going to be able to understand this. So in dealing with this in the end result, please make it that the average person can read it and understand well.
I appreciate it.
And that I paid $30 or I can pay $100 and still don't have to do the $50 all the time. Please make it that the average person can understand, because if you put these people in a position that they're not making any money, you guys, it's going to be the same average poor people that can go. So please.
I get you.
Yeah?
And Ms. Moore, I thank you for that. Now, the truth of the matter is, what you have pointed us in a direction that I think we may have heard from one or two others before. And basically what they have been saying is that this will require an element of training and explanation to people about what it is that we're trying to achieve, and understanding how this not only works potentially in their advantage, but understanding what the obligations now would be. One of the reasons why we wanted to hear from you, your views about the fees, is because this is just a proposal. It is genuinely not set in stone. I've heard when I got back here, for example, I heard Mr. Franklin on the $100 thing, and I probed him a little bit to say, well, that's for a year, and it would translate into $8.33 a month. Now, that is not for me to determine by myself that is reasonable or unreasonable. I think what you all have to do is to tell us where you feel we are going wrong and we are being too harsh. We talked to the fisher folk, the Barnufo, the union representing the fish vendors today, and one of the points they made, for example, was that if you were asked to pay a penalty, and there are some administrative penalties because nobody's going to lock you up or prosecute you nor make you a criminal for vending, that come into end with this bill. But you may have to pay a penalty, for example, if you vend without having a license. Now, if you had to pay that penalty, they said to me that 14 days is too short a period of time. You would prefer 30. Point taken by me. I'm not sure how the rest of the committee feels about it, but we can get there. So those are the things that we need to have your input on, because I understand where you're going and I appreciate your concerns. So feel free, relax, just tell me how you see it.
Well, I seen it as that they shouldn't even be paying a penalty at all. Because they got some people come out and decide to, want to sell off the produce and just do it in one day, and it happens that the police hold them and they don't even have the money. How they could pay a penalty? It shouldn't be a penalty. Even in some markets, and people operating the business, even the market, people alone tends to victimize the people, and they may have to can't even pay the money, pay the rent, pay the certain things, because, and you got to look at it too, that the market areas that you all providing all this don't be profitable for the people. So as penalty, when I look at the penalty, we should really look at that more serious, because I don't figure that people should be paying a penalty at the vending zone.
Where do you operate from now, Mr. Franklin?
I operate in Parramatta Mall.
Do you have to have a permission to be in there?
No, you don't have to got a permit to be in there, but you rent a space.
Oh, you rent a space. Okay, fine. So in that arrangement, if somebody came in there and did not pay rent for a space but just decided, say for example, there was somebody in that space who took sick and then died, so you got a little vacancy, and a person come in and he did not pay rent, he just started to sell. In those circumstances, what would happen with him?
Well, people don't come in and don't pay rent. They just, come and start paying rent for a stall. They pay rent for a stall.
Okay. But you accept that it's possible that there could be a man who will come and just try and do his thing without having paid anything.
In the markets, not really, I don't think that will happen. But it's happened it won't happen like the market people, the people that work and running the markets, they even refuse to take rent from people to make it like they don't pay rent.
Oh, well, you're raising a different matter. I want you to pause here. The Minister of Agriculture wanted to have an input on this, so I'm going to let him speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually glad that the public market at Palmetto was mentioned, because Mr. Franklin might be able to explain this. We are saying that a vending fee of $25 for a license is high, but to own a stall in the market is something like $50, and people take those stalls and then sublet them for as high as $400. Right? A month. Yeah. Yes. $50. So whilst it is true that you may hear some vendors suggesting that $50, $25 is a lot to ask, how do you juxtapose that with a case where someone has a lease agreement for a stall in the market, in a public market, at $50, and then is capable in some instances, when it comes to F&B stalls, food and beverage stalls, can lease them for as high as $1,200 a month. So really and truly, we need to address this issue and see where this is really going. Is it about is it about an unwillingness to pay government rather than the inability to pay? Because I have more than enough evidence. I have met with several vendors where I have dealt with this issue as we seek to modernize the markets. And so I'm keen and very happy to hear an explanation to this anomaly where if it is government, it's too high, but you take the same government property and you sublet it for 10 times as much.
Well, this is the first time I'm hearing this. You know, because I know last time, I know before, it was because you couldn't sublet your stalls or anything like that, but I don't know what happened there or what's going on there, but I never hear anything about this one before. And who's running the markets, and then they were going to be a part of it because it going on their watch. Somebody who got to be dealing with that in the markets.
Mr. Franklin, I thank you for that. I think that is a suggestion that I'm really going to have to look into. But the hardcore reality of it is that the chair of this committee has already invited the manager of markets to come and speak to this statute. And I am going to urge him to walk with enough information to prove that there are instances, and there are several instances within the markets. And as we seek to modernize the markets through legislation like this, and the amendments to the Markets and Slaughterhouses Act, and issue new leases to vendors in markets, I am speaking with absolute certainty when I say that I met with vendors who have said that they were subletting for as much as $1,200 a month in a stall that the government is only charging $50.
Mr.
Hello? Sorry?
Sorry.
Can I?
Sorry, go ahead, Ms. Moore.
I know, all right. I find that this, I'm glad that was said, because this bill, like almost everything else that runs in this place, anyhow, no, the market is run by the government, right? The government issues the spots to people who they issue it to, yes? Now, you is in charge of the market. You, not the person that you have who buying from you. You're the person who running this market. So if underhanded, because that's underhanded, because you're paying $50 to the government and you leasing a poor man $1,800, yes? Now, how is that happening? How is that happening? The guy that's going to bring the information for you, for sure, it would have to be the fault of the vendors, because the vendors just run the place. Yes? But anyhow, I don't know, because I'm not so intelligent on these things. But me, I am on for poor people. I know there are people out there who making thousands of dollars on this vending thing. Good for you, great. I get that maybe it is that some taxes need to be happening because more money needs to be coming in. Great. You understand what I'm saying? But I for the person who just trying to make it by, who is actually paying the $50 and trying to pay their light, their water, support the children, these things. You understand what I'm saying? The man who paying $50 for the thing, again, $1,000 he living. And if you can pay $1,500 for a stall that $15 you will go be living too. You understand what I'm saying? So them good. We for the people who ain't so good. We were the people who might find it a little difficult. And I guarantee you that it is more the majority who will find it a little difficult than the minority. I think I got that right. The English? Right. You understand what I'm saying? So these people that are making the money, great for them. This bill is supposed to help people who are in there who are finding it difficult to, you know, and making it better. Can we deal with that? Can we deal with how can we make it better so that nobody can pay $50 for a stall and rent it out to $15 for somebody else? These are the things you want to not happen, so that the average low man can make money and then probably be able to pay one of this $25 one, $50, be able to pay this. It'd be arguing about things that just don't matter all the time. They're making money, it wrong, stop it. You're the government, do something about it. It's been happening forever now, which means that it will have to be something. Deal with the issue at hand, which is poor people who want to make money and who want to get themselves going.
And Ms. Moore,
That's my part. Thank you very much.
and I thank you. You're 100% correct. And obviously, this is a matter that, well, you've heard the minister say he's asking the person in charge to come, and he will have to do some explanation. I'm very grateful that you have raised that, Minister. Who? Oh, I'm very grateful that you've raised that. I wanted to share with you the regulations as I know I'm understanding them. The stall in Palmetto, for example, where the stall is, well, I don't know if this is Palmetto. This speaks to the markets and slaughterhouse regulations as they are enforced now. So we're talking about stalls in a market that are less than 8 square meters, being rented for not less than $20 and not more than $50 a month. That's if you're less than 8 square meters. Between 8 square meters and 19 square meters, which is a medium-sized stall, it has to be between $50 a month and $100 a month. And 19 square meters or more, not less than $100 and not more than $200. That is what the regulations in force are requiring. So if in fact it is correct that there are people who then sublet, and they sublet outside of this zone, then I believe that it is true to say they're in breach of the law. And you're quite right, ma'am, that it having been brought to the attention of the government, it will now have to be dealt with appropriately. There was a request from Minister Ford for the floor.
All right, thank you. I just want to say a special thanks to you, Ms. Moore, for being here. And I want to say to you, your unbridled discourse so far has been extremely refreshing, and I want you to continue with this gusto. I want to date ourselves back to your previous submission, where you were making mention to the fact that young persons, even like your son, that you have a sense of and a yearning for those persons to be trained. I want to say to you, it collides certainly with what me as former minister you was saying and exposing. It collides certainly with this government and our policy perspective, our philosophical perspective, as it relates to training not only of vendors, but persons across the sectors. And I want to say that there are systems in place now for young people. Even when you try to acquire or in your attempt to have a trust loan, there is a training mechanism in place before those loans are given. As it relates to the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme, another training avenue and mechanism for young persons before they enter the business world. Even the Building Blocks program we have with youngsters off the block before they go into the whole vending regime, they are trained and they must pass their training course before they start the vending and the whole vending experience in terms of ensuring that it becomes a part of their commercial life cycle. And I want to say to you, that is something that we hold dear to our hearts, and we are certainly in sync with what you're saying as it relates to training. And I want to give you the calm, rested assurance today that we agree totally with you that those persons, if you are trained to make a vending as professional, the minister side of me of markets would say, to bring it to the fight of sanitary standards. I am equally agreeing with you that training must be an important part of the conversation. So I just want to say to you that thanks for bringing it to the fore, but we are in total agreement there. Thank you.
Ms. Tony Moore.
Good afternoon. Good evening, Ms. Moore. Another Moore here. I hear you speaking very passionately and frank into the meeting, and I appreciate your contribution so far. The issues that you raise are not the only issues that may arise from time to time. There are other issues that might relate once a license is granted and so on. There may be issues that relate to relocations and evictions and a number of other matters. The legislation proposes that those issues would be heard before a tribunal if they are appealed. And when we were speaking to another group, particularly the other vendors association, it was accepted that it would be a good thing to have a representative from among vendors to sit on a tribunal, and the tribunal will be responsible to hear complaints and make a decision as regards whether a particular action that was taken in circumstances was reasonable or not. The question for your grouping, so the question to you and Mr. Franklin, would be whether you think you would be able to sit with the other associations and among you determine one person from the vending community that could hear any complaints that would be raised, that would arise from time to time. It means that that person will come either from Barvin, either from your association or from the fisherfolk, but if you can sit together jointly and determine who would represent you in hearing complaints. Do you think that that is something that is possible?
I'm a new member, so Mr. Franklin would have to help you on that one. But
yes, I say it's possible that we could meet with the other associations and sit down and look at someone that could sit on the panel and represent the vendors or represent whatever going on.
Fair enough, and thank you for that. Because that will be very critical for the work that the committee, that the tribunal would have to do. That tribunal, sir, is basically going to have on it an attorney. It will have on it that person that the vendors offer, and another person who will be experienced in business of vending, even if he or she is not a vendor themselves, but they've had some experience with it and association with it. And that is really, as Ms. Moore just indicated, intended to look after any of the issues that a vendor may raise. For example, the very important point that Ms. Moore just spoke to, which is that you may be relocating me, but I am not happy with the way in which the relocation process is going, so I want to appeal it. And that tribunal would be charged with the responsibility of treating to that. So as you can see, it needed to be a tribunal that has an understanding to some extent of what the business of vending entails. There's another request for the floor. No? All right, okay, fine. While we do not have any immediate requests for questions, I want to give you the opportunity to ask us some. I'm mindful, Juliet and Keith, that you all had indicated just now, or Juliet indicated that you're not here all evening. So are there any concerns that you wish to raise at this particular point?
it's on? Yeah, right.
Yes, I can hear you.
We really have to go just now, but my one is this. Vending, it means perishable stuff and non-perishable. You make a committee, you would hope that the committee don't wait, that it is not that the people chosen for this committee, because people seem to just choose people and put them there and say, well, yeah, you do that, yeah? In choosing the committee, please can you be try to, I don't know how possible that can be, but like be people who actually fair and speedy, because you want a license for the market that coming up, the farmers market. You apply on Monday, it can take you, it's supposed to take 2 days. You next 5 weeks you still waiting, but because the person who runs it knows Mr. Franklin, he gets his on time. But me that don't know Mr. Franklin, I still waiting. You know? So this committee should be of upstanding people, I guess, who understand the workings of this thing. And that's basically it.
Julia, I will not detain you anymore, just to say to you that I think the leader of the opposition wants to have a word. I want to tell you that even though you now come, the truth is that you shoot straight and you're keeping it real. And I would urge, please, that you don't throw in the towel on this. You may now start as representing this association, but believe you me, that approach is what the associations in Barbados need, that spirit of frankness and straightforwardness. So continue in that vein. Mr. Leader of the Opposition, please.
Thank you, Brother Chair. Ms. Moore, Mr. Franklin, good afternoon, and thank you for coming today and contributing to the deliberations of the committee. Mr. Chair, Brother Chair, fellow members of the committee, there's something that has been sounded forth by both these voices that has resonated with me, and I would just want to reemphasize it because I share the sentiment that I hear coming from these bosoms. And while we may be seeking to put in place a legislative framework that would provide for a more business-like profile and approach to how vending is done in Barbados, and to order it, regulate it in such a way as to seek to empower those who are involved in that economic activity. I think what I hear coming from these two voices, and I share that we need to be cautious that we don't create the kind of bureaucratic impediment or the kind of bureaucratic framework that becomes an impediment. Rather than helping them, it further frustrates them in what they're trying to do. So I wanted to reinforce that. I thought I heard that being clearly said by them in their words. I simply wanted to ask Ms. Moore, if I may, where she does her vending. If I may ask, where she does her vending.
Well, I'm a very new member, and vending per se, like you could say, it's from at home, but it's more of my sons. I have 3 sons, by the way, and a daughter. They have some land that the government, the acre land, and I do the seedlings for them, and we have a site online where we sell eggplant seedlings, we sell different kinds of stuff like that. So that's what we into. We just start, my son just, so let me do some advertising for my boys. Boam's Farm, right? It's, that's now, they're now getting off the ground, so that's, and the intention is to come out into the vending now and put we wares out there as we go on.
What is that name?
Boam's, B-O-A-M-S, Boam's Farm. Right. And my son always says, Zachary always says, Mom, before you go into something fully, you must find out what the market is and what's going on. So this is basically a lot of me doing market research as to how we're going to get our products out, how we're going to sell it. And I don't want to go to the side of the road and the police just move me. I want to be stable in knowing that I can go such and such a place, I can play my wear, and I don't have to worry about nobody pushing me around, or I gotta be scared. But we have to go.
So you don't actually sell from a public space at the moment?
No, not as yet, but that's the intention.
Yeah,
and
I was just wondering what particular challenges you were experiencing if you were selling from a public space. Mr. Franklin operates from the Palmetto. Mr. Franklin, you operate from where?
Palmetto Mall.
Yeah, what are the particular challenges you face there?
Well, there's some challenges. It's very tough. If I could have stopped a little longer, I would tell you all the challenges, but
give me one or two that we want to help.
One of the challenges is the market people refusing to collect people rent and say they won't pay. Things like that there. And right now markets want uplifting. The markets right now, I don't know, the people that are supposed to take care of the markets, or, they're not doing the job. So markets actually deteriorating right now in Barbados. They're only looking like when they first built or first get on hand, they look like it working good, but then eventually the challenge is to keep it up to standard.
So if you could improve the Palmetto Mall, what's the first thing you would do? What's the most important thing? What's the most urgent thing?
We want painting right through outside and inside, and change the staff.
We will talk to some of those staff when we come back again. I want to thank you, Mr. Franklin. I really want to thank you, Ms. Moore, for your as I said, your candor. You've been very direct with us. Mr. Franklin, Ms. Moore, God bless you. Thank you for sharing your time this evening with the committee. You may leave now. Colleagues, we will have to. Well, first of all, let me just notify everybody that you will be circulated with a copy of the submissions to the committee coming from the COVID unit and also from the Registrar of Cooperatives. We will reach out to members during the course of next week. It is my thinking at this point that we will try to convene a meeting for Friday morning. And probably have that run until, what time you starting to? Yeah, probably run until midday or 1 o'clock. But I will settle those times with the Clerk of Parliament, and we will come back to you all at that particular occasion. Can I have a motion, please, for the suspension of the day, adjournment of the day's proceedings?
So moved, sir.
Thank you, Minister Humphrey. Seconder, please. Minister Ford. I'm sorry that Minister Cummins caught our eye first. Colleagues, we stand adjourned. Have a good weekend. Please try to stay safe, everybody.